Welcome to the podcast where we discuss all matters financial planning and investing. This content contains general information only and may not be relevant to everyone. Please contact our office to make sure and determine if this is relevant for you.
Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Lochnan and I'm joined with my co-host Cole Eccles. How are you, Cole?
Good and yourself, Dave?
Very well. Today we're talking about people, are really focused on building wealth and those sorts of things. And there's a whole bunch of mistakes that they can make. And it actually stems back to probably even in their 30s, getting through your 40s and 50s and then, when you're even retired. And what I've found over time is sort of the number one on the list is a lot of people really underestimate how long they're going to live for.
Yeah, definitely. I think you look at the ABS, someone comes up with statistical life expectancy, but with all the advances or medical advances really extending that out, and you've got to look at your own family as well. If you've got parents or grandparents live to their 90s, it's what's in your genes. So, yeah. And actually I read an article earlier today about Colonial First Aid's done a survey about what young people think they're going to receive in inheritance. I think the average figure was something like $525,000.
For inheritance.
Is average person, and that's like the value of the family home and residual super. But what the article was about was that people, if they're factoring that into their plans in terms of what they're going to have in their later years, comes back to living longer, is that whilst that 525 is actually overstated, they believe, or people are overestimating because people are living longer and people are spending or cost more to live, and so that 525 is actually. And I think the big thing is, it's people. Everyone is living longer. I don't wonder how long before they push out the life expectancy to a few more years. Based on
data,
yeah,
really.
Exactly,
it comes back to, it's like you used to work and die, right?
Yeah.
Or like the hard labour stuff till they were 65, and a lot of people done it differently now, just with the medical advances, and just go on another 20 or 30 years from now, it'll be, probably the stats are going to keep pushing out and out. But the biggest problem is there's a lot of people, what I find, are not saving anything, and getting later down in life. And as you get older, it actually gets really hard to, continue the grind, getting up, going to work, earning the money, paying for things. And if you actually haven't, utilised any of your assets or build assets or so forth, and if you're relying on someone else giving you some money down the track, and, what if it's 500 grand or that, the transfer of wealth scenario, it can be really dangerous to rely on. So a lot of people think that, well, I don't look after myself that well, or this happens or that happens, and, I'll get what I get. As you get older, it gets definitely more concerning.
Yeah.
And it's more like, well, if I'm going to live that long, that's a long time. If I stop working at 60, for argument's sake, and I'm going to live to, 85 or life expectancy around those areas, or 90, that's a long time to fund.
That's right. Even those people retiring at 65 or say even 67 because they can access age pension, that's still, a good 17, 20 years that you're going to be supposedly or statistically, you're still going to be around. And that's a long time to fund yourself when you're relying on your own money. So,
and that comes down to probably the second one, is really spending too much too soon. And what I mean by that is, as you go through your life, you got different spending habits. Like when you get out of school and you start working, it's like, a lot of people start getting into bad habits at that stage. But then it continues through your 30s, continue through your 40s and 50s. If nothing changes or your behaviours don't change, generally you just get what you get.
Yeah.
And what I find is a lot of people just get stuck in that spending mechanism. And it's happening a lot more. Have you noticed that just from people in general that living paycheck to paycheck?
Oh, definitely. And it's also with even the living paycheck to paycheck as people earn more, and I think we touched this on the previous podcast, you get that lifestyle creep where as you earn more, you start to spend more. And I think we've said previously as well, you've got to strike that balance. You don't work 9 to 5 or work really hard just to squirrel it all the way and not to really enjoy life. But, you got to strike a balance. There's got to be...
Yeah, absolutely. I think spend too much too soon, or some people just spend everything, and I think that becomes a problem. And the reason why a lot of people spend everything, they don't have that allocation for the money. So they don't know what they should be doing with the money, so they don't do anything with the money. Yeah. So if money's sitting there what happens?
Yeah, people grab it, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it spends my wife, my son, even though he's doing a uni course and stuff,
Yeah.
my wife harasses him like no tomorrow. She's got an account under her name for him
To put his money away.
to put his money away, right?
Yeah.
So every time he gets paid, she says to me, "Did you pay him?"
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I paid him, right?
Yeah.
And he's got to put in a certain amount, but for him to get the money back,
Yeah.
he has to ask my wife for it.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? He's not a signatory to
Yeah.
the account. So that's quite interesting how that dynamics works. But it's, once you allocate the money and you're set by rules, and that might be, saving for something, it might be a house or an investment or whatever it may be, and you start allocating your money, you get out of the pattern spending too much too soon.
Yeah.
And then you get into the actual good savings habit and investing habit and, the rainy day fund. So like if you didn't get paid this week, hey, you might last another few
Yeah.
weeks, right? Another year or 2 years. And as you go down the track, obviously you're trying to replace your income over time.
Have you put hurdles in place? Like it's one thing too, because I know with my son, he sort of starts and stops, and he puts money aside into an account, but that account is accessible. It's on his internet banking, so he does part of it well. He does put money aside, but then he accesses that money. So I think if you put hurdles, and I had a client the other day, and he was saying to you that he made it hard for himself. He put money into this bank account that wasn't easy to access, and like you couldn't. There's no ATM withdrawal. I think he had to fill a form, so it made it really difficult. And that's the way he ended up saving a fair bit of money. Putting money away because he put hurdles in place, so he couldn't get money easily.
I know, it's so true. It's so hard to be just disciplined. It's
Yeah.
like I know myself with food, right? So like I try to lose weight here and there and try to look after myself, and then I get to a home and I'm like, I might have 10, then I'm like, well, what's next?
Yeah,
where's the ice cream?
Yeah.
Where's the chocky biscuits? So it's like, but if they're not there,
Yeah.
I can't have them.
That's right.
Right. So I've been very disciplined in trying to take things away. So in different scenarios, when you put money into an investment or you put money into an investment property or put money in a super, so when the money actually goes away that you can't touch, it actually becomes easier.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that temptation
Is
goes.
away,
So
yeah.
even your son having access to that's probably getting more responsible.
Yeah.
But getting it out into something where it's with superannuation, for argument's sake, you can't take it out until your preservation age, and then if you buy an investment property as well, it's not something you can sell tomorrow. Generally, not
Yeah.
really fast. With the share market, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
You can get it faster,
Yeah.
but. They all have mechanisms to really help you build your wealth and grow all those
Yeah.
sorts of things. So without something for your place for your money to go, it just, there's not too many people I say, I didn't have, look, I've got two classic examples this week, right? I'm working with two younger clients and they've come to me from an established, the client's been with me about 8 years and he's built up his wealth really well, and they've been chatting to him and he's like, you've got to go and see this guy Dave, like I should have spoke to him years and years ago, right? So now they actually both have, and there's just shy of 40, good super balances, great income, but the savings ain't there. It's like the income is phenomenal, but the savings, like what the hell's happened?
But how many times do you see that though? With so many, and they say to you, I don't know where it goes. And
it's because it's got no purpose. So at the end of the day, once you get a structure in place and you follow that structure, it doesn't happen overnight where all of a sudden all this money shows up. It's about, doing the right things compound and not doing anything compounds into nothing as well. So, it's really interesting how people can go. And probably the number 3 is not having a retirement plan early. Getting that plan early, what we find over 20 years, if you can't touch an investment, say superannuation for 20 years, and regular contributions, looking after it and so forth, it just ends up to an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the same as if you invest into a share market investment, for argument's sake, and also if you bought into an investment property in the right area with right growth and all that, the things that make those type of things work, or you invested in your business for 20 years, the earlier you start, and it's like all the people that say, instant millionaires. Generally, they've been doing it for 30 years. It wasn't, yesterday that all of a sudden they had that money. So I think it's really, from what I've seen, so many of our clients, the earlier they start, the better.
Yeah, and it's also, if you start really early, you find if you leave it too late, you've got to be a bit more aggressive in what you do to get you where you want to be. So if you start earlier, you can take less risks because, like you said, you've got time on your side, the benefit of compounding, etc. It's I suppose, a less risky way to go about it. And there's also, if you, like in terms of what you need to allocate to get you to where you want to be, would be less as well. So it makes it a lot easier if you've got time on your side.
Another thing about if you start earlier, you can finish earlier. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
So, like,
Yeah.
being able to retire at 55, it's a goal for a lot of people, saying, or be able to change their lifestyle or have enough money, especially if they start around their 40s.
Yeah.
I reckon over 10 years is a short period of time. 15 years is much.
Decent, yeah.
You can get things compounding a lot more for you. And 20 years, obviously, is, it's a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
So a lot of things can change in those areas. So starting earlier, and that comes down to anything, retirement planning is one thing, but, building out your investments in the share market or property or business or whatever it may be, the earlier the start, the better off you're going to be.
And with it, and planning, having a retirement plan sort of ties in with those first 2 points as well about, not spending too much too soon because you don't know really what you're working towards. So and like you said, if you've got a purpose for that money, at least you won't just be spending, hopefully you won't just be spending willy-nilly. You'd have, you've got to be working towards something, I suppose. You can't just, just have things floating around the ether and hope you'll be all right.
At the end of the day, like if you've got no direction, that's what it comes down, like sitting down and figuring out what you actually want. Because a lot of people don't actually know what they could achieve over 10 years or 15 years or so forth unless they get some help. That's what I've just found. It's just really common. Don't know where you can go. You just generally don't end up doing anything. You get paralyzed from making non-decisions because you don't, it's just an unknown. So it's so fearful. You push it away and you haven't got the confidence or support of someone else who can really relay that and seen hundreds of different scenarios that work, but also hundreds that don't work as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there, putting a lot of information out there that can't really back stuff up. And you got to be really careful what you go into and what you don't go into. But obviously, you need to make choices and take some steps. And sometimes that's bloody scary. I remember the first time I started my first business, I had to borrow $10,000 off my outlaws, and I was shit scared. I had to borrow 10 grand back then. You know, so everything takes. And I think as you start making moves, your confidence grows.
Yeah.
So you start seeing sort of things that work, things that don't work, and obviously. If you can learn from other people of things that don't work, that's much cheaper. Than trying to do trial and error. It's a dumb to try to, work it all out yourself.
And it's like with anything. If you think about, say, you're trying to lose weight and it's taking that first step, and so that's, I suppose, daunting to get going, but you got to start somewhere. And once you do, and you take little steps, and suddenly you start to see results, and then, like you said, become more confident, and then that, I suppose, gives you motivation to keep going.
It's a hard one. So money and weight,
it's always together.
They're always, it's like over time, like I battled through it my whole life. It's like, obviously we'd all like to be probably a little bit different than we are.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a constant battle.
Yeah.
And I think that was with money for a lot of people at times. So it's, just being consistent and, especially with money, is just get back on the horse and so forth.
Yeah.
Like if you mess up or whatever, so what?
Yeah.
Move on and go from there.
And you made a good point that consistency, you read all books and they all come back to consistency, being disciplined, etc. But you got to have goals or something to work towards, I suppose.
Yeah, if you don't have any goals, you don't know where you're going, and then you can't measure anything because nothing's consistent. When money's taken out of your pocket every week or every month or whatever it may be, and you've just got to give these, the assets work over time. I always say people don't work so well, but the assets, whether it's a property, shares, super, whatever it is, generally they're going to do their thing. It's how you use them, to your advantage.
Yeah.
You either use them or you don't. That comes down to another one. It's like, especially if people have built up a bunch of money, drawing down their money the wrong way once they actually get to retirement.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times before. Say we use super as an example, and people think that, or one is they look at let's say, end of the $1 million in super, so that's a sort of a biggish sum, and then they think that, suddenly it's all there. And we found I've worked with people that had less than that, and then they've taken it all out because, from a tax perspective, it doesn't really make a difference whether it's in there or in the own name, etc., blah, blah. But what happens is, we pointed before, is then suddenly the money is very accessible. So it's sitting in a bank account, and then, again, you just spend because there's, it's $400,000 sitting there. There's never been that much money in the bank account. And then suddenly, quickly your money goes down. So there's, you've got to be wise about how you draw down, again, put those hurdles in place.
There's a lot of, once you give people access to money that haven't had access to it,
they'll go,
some things can just break. Something mentally goes wrong, and all of a sudden they got no money, and it's like, oh my God. So happens very infrequent, luckily enough with us, but it does happen, so people have access and so forth. But also, selling things at the wrong time, paying too much tax, for argument's sake, so they can take money out of their super that might cost them tax to do things, or if it's not set up right, or if they sell an asset, whether that's shares, whether that's property, in the wrong financial year.
Yeah.
Can cost them a whole bunch of tax.
Yeah, that's right. And again, and that comes down to planning and have retirement plan. If, part of your plan is to, sell down assets, lumpy assets to give you access to capital, then it's your timing or planning around when those will be sold to try and, I suppose, reduce the amount of tax you pay. So it all comes back to planning, having an idea. Well, you need, if you're going to sell assets, well, it all comes down to, I suppose, having a plan. So,
Yeah, you need a plan. Generally, people have got they've got some super. Just depending on what degree, they might have other assets in properties and shares and cash, all that sort of thing. And a lot of people don't know how to actually get money out of super and switch it into what's called an account-based pension, and just have all these things. So it gets all confusing. And there's just so many mistakes that are made. So if you get to that stage, get some help with that. And then the last one, let's go on to the estate planning.
Well, there's a couple of points there. One is, again, around tax and about getting assets to people, the right people at the right time in the most tax-effective way. And I've just come across recently quite a few occasions where talking to just people in general or in just like in socially, and lack of understanding around with your super, that's most people's biggest retirement asset, is the lack of beneficiary nominations and how that works. And I know people that have passed away without nominations in place, and this delays everything and makes it really hard. Someone who's passed away and was divorced and didn't change it, and so it creates a lot of problems. So it's something that can't be ignored. And with the one with tax, and I think it's been come up, I've seen on Facebook recently a bit about how an individual can basically minimise the tax to their beneficiaries on their death when their super's paid out. Yep. Doesn't cost them anything, but it can really save tens of thousands of dollars to your beneficiaries.
Yeah, so in doing recontribution strategies and so forth. So when it comes to estate planning, it's one of those things, especially when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, it's like, I'm not dying yet, right? What do I need one, right? It's going to be miles away. And then, as you get in your 50s and 60s, if you keep that mindset, obviously there's going to, we're all going to die someday.
Yeah, exactly.
Just when, right? Yeah. So it's making sure that you have it up to date so it is tax effective. And I always find that you've built all the money up. It's yours to distribute how you want, but I don't think you want to give too much more to the ATO than you have. Exactly. Generally, most people over their working life given over $4 million to the ATO.
Yeah.
Plus some 10, 20 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, at that particular time, there's strategies around that. And then, there's opportunities around that, as long as you've got some advisors and some people around you that can help you. But that's really just 5 strategies or 5 things that you can make mistakes on pretty easily, in financial planning. And so to get things right and moving for yourself, you just need to be, on the ball and understand different aspects of so many different things.
And I think it's, those 5 points, again, I think we touched before, you can go to the internet and read things there. But if you just seek out advice, someone who's seen many cases, you're just focusing on yours, I think you can get the right help and, make sure you're on the right path.
Yeah, the smartest people around know you need help in the right areas. It's just the reality. When it comes to finance, it's a tricky area. There's definitely triggers that can trigger you to get some advice, like retiring or building up for retirement or, getting a new job or getting an inheritance or all of a sudden you got some surplus cash flow. There's a whole bunch of triggers that would, would make a lot of sense to get some financial planning help.
Definitely.
But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you need some help with anything, please feel free to reach out and book in a call. If not, we'll look forward to seeing you soon.